Halloween crypto surprise? The Blockchain Association, a nonprofit organization that works to advance the future of crypto in the U.S., is launching a dashboard today that tracks the number of Security Exchange Commission enforcement, also known as SEC, actions against the digital currency industry under the leadership of Secretary Chair Gary Gensler.
According to the report, the SEC has deployed a, quote, regulation by enforcement approach against America's leading crypto companies. Blockchain partnered with analytics company HarrisX and released polling revealing that voters believe the United States has taken the wrong approach toward crypto. Here to discuss this launch and how it could impact crypto voters' decisions at the polls is Blockchain Association CEO Kristin Smith. Welcome, Kristin.
Great to be here, Niall. Thanks, Amber.
So I think just off of the top, if you can explain to people who don't necessarily follow every twist and turn of the crypto industry, why do you think this approach or these regulations or these enforcements are being conducted in an unfair manner?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. If you look at the way that the securities laws work, they don't neatly apply to the nature of crypto assets. And so instead of engaging in a constructive dialogue during his tenure, the SEC chair, Gary Gensler, instead engaged in an incredibly aggressive regulation by enforcement approach to try to slow the industry down and prevent it from growing here in the United States. And so we set out to quantify what this impact might be with our partners at HarrisX. And we found that within even just a small set of our membership who volunteered their legal fees, that there have been well over $400 million in the past 3.5 years that have gone toward defending against regulation by enforcement actions from the SEC. And in total, there have been well over 100 different regulation by enforcement actions that they have taken in that 3.5 year period. And this is an incredibly large amount. I think the one thing that can't be measured is what that money would have been done if it had put into hiring people, into building new innovations and investing in tech in the United States. And so we're really excited to kick off this campaign. Even since launching this morning, we've had additional companies reach out that want to add their numbers to the total. So we expect these numbers to rise in the coming days.
One of the things I hear consistently from friends of mine who are interested in crypto is that they like that it gives them an option to be sort of off the grid outside of cash, for example. It allows them the ability to have financial transactions that are not necessarily tracked by the government. So what is the impetus for all of this regulation as consumers obviously want something very different?
Yeah, well, we want to have regulation in this space. I think that the problem is we need Congress to put the framework in place, and it's actually like a common misconception that these assets are not traceable. They're on immutable blockchains, and so you can absolutely track and trace where they go. But I think the bigger question is, how do we regulate the markets? And what we did in HarrisX did a poll this past week. They actually found that two-thirds of voters agree that the SEC should wait for clear guidelines before engaging in these legal actions. And so we need a new framework, which is, sort of leads into the election next week. I think that we've seen really positive leadership on both sides of the aisle in both chambers. We have a lot of candidates that are including crypto policy positions on their websites. And I think that we're going to have an incredibly pro-crypto Congress, regardless of the outcome of the election in terms of leadership of the House and Senate. I think furthermore, though, what we've seen with the presidential candidates is that we need to make sure that whoever comes in and whoever is our next president, whether it be Trump or Harris, that Gary Gensler is no longer in the position of chair at the SEC. Fortunately, Donald Trump has already vowed to get rid of Gary Gensler on day one. Harris's campaign has not gotten that specific yet, but it is our hope that if she wins, that she would also swap this out, because this is just really an absolutely counterproductive approach. It's not the way to treat new innovative industries in the United States. We're not asking for no regulation. We're just asking for appropriate regulation, because the securities laws don't apply today. That's what the courts are telling us as this litigation is going on. And so we really need Congress to step in and provide a new framework.
following up on what Kamala and Trump respectively would do with crypto, Trump has been very vocal about embracing crypto. He accepts transactions with it on his campaign website in the merchandise store. He's also has members of his family launching their own cryptocurrencies. How much do you think that is swaying crypto-interested voters in thinking that he might be better on regulation than Kamala Harris?
Yeah, well, I think, he has an incredibly established position, as you just said, which is, by the way, in contrast to where he was in the last administration. He's really taken a lot of time to learn about this space, and he has changed his opinion over time. I think if Harris had been in the campaign longer, we probably would have gotten more specifics out of her as well. But given the truncated nature, there wasn't much that could be done. So, I do think there is hope, for either of those candidates. But what we've found is that 18% of voters, just in the poll from this last week, consider cryptocurrency one of the important issues that they're factoring into their voting decision in the election. So that tracks with the polls we've seen across the summer and even going back into the spring. So if you have 1 in 5 voters that is, thinking about this, it's important to have a position. And I think it would be very beneficial to Kamala Harris to come out with something more specific, to talk. She said at a very high level that she wants to support the innovation here, but the devil is really in the details, and I think that she would get a boost by coming out with something more specific.
Kristin, before we let you go, something I'm curious about, and look, I'm not going to present myself as an expert in this area because I certainly am not one, but you said a few moments ago that it's not that your organization is opposed to all regulation. You don't want excessive regulation. In broad strokes, what do you think should be legitimately the subject of regulation within the crypto world?
Yeah, well, I think that there are disclosures that need to happen at the time that new tokens are created, because at that point, when there are teams of software developers that are writing code to launch new blockchains and put assets on those blockchains, there's a lot of insider information at that time. So it does make sense to have disclosures at that time. I also think we need to have regulation around how to do stable coins. Like today, that it's very clear that there isn't any federal law that governs that kind of an asset. I think the other thing is that we want to have basic protections for the marketplaces for where these assets trade. The problem is today that the SEC only has authority over securities marketplaces. The CFTC, the Commodities Future Trading Commission, they only have jurisdiction over derivatives markets. There's nothing that gives the federal government authority to regulate the cash markets for these crypto commodity assets. And so we need that new authority in place. So it drives me crazy when people say crypto is trying to avoid regulation or have lesser regulation. That simply isn't true. The reality is that there are gaps in the federal law today, and we need Congress to step in to put that regulation in place so that investors know that the marketplaces and the centralized intermediaries that they're relying on to acquire these assets are a safe place to be.
All right, Kristin Smith, thank you so much for joining us today on Rising. We appreciate it.
Great to be here.